Davey D hanging out with you this afternoon, and here we are still at the Campaign for America's Future. Sitting in front of us, Sarah Robinson, who is described as a trained social futurist.
Indeed.
And a blogger. I'm going to have you step into the mic there. And she's a blogger for a number of sites, including AltNet and the Daily Kos and the Open Left. And one of the good things that we wanted to have you on about is because of I guess you've been talking about violence on the right.
I have been.
And what you've been described as saying is that it's going to be a long, hot summer.
It is.
Now, for a lot of our listeners, people that are listening to Hard Knock, we've been saying it's going to be a long, hot summer because this year has seen an unprecedented amount of police shootings. You know, Oscar Grant, Adolphus Grimes, Guy Tolan. I mean, the list goes on.
Right.
You know, it seems like every other week we're seeing some sort of police situation. So
right.
we were preparing for a long, hot summer. But then on the tail end of that, you have this right-wing violence that
exactly.
has been in the peripheries. And I guess in the Bay, we're a little bit isolated from it. But, you know, traveling around, we see that it's a very real scenario and rearing its ugly head most recently with, I was going to say Greg Tiller.
Right.
Is it Greg Tiller?
George.
It's George Tiller.
Dr. George Tiller.
Dr. George Tiller, the doctor who is doing late-term abortions.
Yes.
Talk about why you think it's going to be a long, hot summer.
Well, I find your police shooting thing very fascinating because I think there may be a bit of a connection there.
I think so too. That's why I brought it up.
And I think part of it is that law enforcement is expecting this violence, and they're on a hair trigger. On April 7th, the Department of Homeland Security put out a very famous memo that absolutely inflamed the right wing. That also predicted a long, hot summer. That noted that the right wing extremist violence was up basically since the moment Obama got elected. And we had started kind of coming up after, this is in the days before, but once the election, especially the inauguration, we saw attacks of all kinds going up, right-wing extremists acting out violence. The Southern Poverty Leadership Conference has been tracking this. The SPLC website has found hate crimes, hate speech, eliminationist violence. All this stuff is up all over the country, and it's gotten to be a real dangerous thing. And so DHS put out this report pointing out to law enforcement, it was a for official use only, which means only law enforcement was ever supposed to have this document, warning them that this stuff was coming down the pipe. And so now they're all on a hair trigger. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to find out that some of these police shootings that you're seeing have to do with the fact that these guys they're getting it from both sides right now. Yeah.
Well, I'll take it a little bit further. With the right wing, I think when we say right wing and we talk about violence associated with them, we're thinking of nutcases. You walk down the street,
yes.
You know, the guys with the camouflage on, and you might be saying something, militia type guys.
Right, lone wolf.
Right, lone wolf type individuals. But what I've found is that people become a lot more sophisticated. They have radio shows. Mm-hmm. They know how to couch. They're
on the internet.
They're on and they say things that make a lot of sense to a certain degree. So I might see somebody and they'll say something like 9/11 was a conspiracy, and there'll be a bunch of us that goes, yeah, we agree, and the government is wrong, and they're doing this under Bush. And you're going, yep, we agree, and we'll travel all the way down the road, and then all of a sudden, out of left field, it'll be like, in the other problem we have with these damn Latinos, and it'll be some racist rhetoric that comes out of, like, where did that come from?
Right.
So I'm in Texas a lot, and so you hear that, you see there's a whole culture that's based around that. But what kind of struck me with the level of sophistication.
Yes.
So you found that other black folks, for example, might buy into it.
Right.
So I'm thinking if they're that sophisticated and you couple that with the reports of all these quote-unquote gangs that have been joining the military,
mm-hmm.
If the gangs are joining the military, you don't think these people who've already been in the military have been there?
Yeah.
Which means that they're probably a part of law enforcement. So now, so when you have the cop in New York that's being shot by another white cop, because he's running to stop a crime, you have a bunch of youth that get beat down by the police in spite of all the protests in front of their parents for something that they didn't do in New York last night. you're having these situations in California. There's been 7 or 8 police shootings in
Were these guys
Southern
veterans?
Cali.
Is it been verified that these guys were veterans?
I don't know if they've been veterans, but I think what we're picking up is that the scenario is always the same, and it seems to fall in line with the hair trigger type of thing.
Right. Right. We've got a whole culture right now that's really affirming this kind of violence, this kind of white man violence. One of the things that we've been tracking for a while, and SPLC has also written about extensively, is that the white patriot movements for the last couple of years have been consciously sending their guys to, actually since 2005 they've been tracking this, into the military for weapons training, which they believe will help them in the racial holy war that they want to foment. At the same time, you have a movement called the Joel's Army movement, which is the Christian Dominionist families, these quiverful families that have 7 or 8 kids, and they raise their sons to go into the military.
Right.
And in the idea that they will also start some kind of holy war eventually by and by with these skills. The military used to be very, very careful about letting white racists into their ranks.
Really?
Yes, they did. They called them out because it's really bad for unit cohesion. It's one of the more integrated institutions in our society, and they tried hard to keep those guys out, and they threw them out in basic if they found out that you were that kind. And starting in 2006, they were so starved for warm bodies, they started looking the other way, and so suddenly you got swastikas on walls in Baghdad, and you got these guys who were racist going in, indoctrinating the guys who weren't racist before. They're from small towns. Have never been in an interracial situation before. They don't know how to handle it. And then you got these guys who are there saying, "Hey, guy, assert your white pride, and indoctrinate them." And then they come home with this stuff. And I don't know if they're joining police forces, but they're certainly joining up with each other. And that training makes them very, very dangerous because a white racist, who's inclined to violence and has that military training is 10 to 20 times more effective than one who is not. Scott Roeder didn't have that training; he got caught instantly. Eric Rudolph did, and Tim McVeigh did. And all you need is a handful of those guys hooked up with the internet, and you have got big trouble.
Well, a couple of questions. One, I have military family, and I've always been told that, so they've always told me the stories about, there's always been that separation and cohesion thing for the longest time. And I also remember the famous case in the early 90s, or maybe it might have been the 80s, where they caught a couple of people who were Klansmen over at NORAD.
Right.
So that's always been there.
Right.
I think
and they do try. They try real hard to find those guys and toss them.
Right. But I guess, the whole warm bodies scenario that you described, I tend to believe that. The question that I have is whether or not we need to be concerned in terms of it just being a racial thing, or is it really just going after big government, as we saw in the militia movement with Waco and some of those other places, but they still have this racist stormfront type of orientation.
Some of them do and some of them don't. David Koresh was not a racist,
right?
For instance. See, it's hard to generalize because all of these guys have their different angles. But a lot of them indeed are anti-Semitic. They're racist. They're certainly anti-woman. They've got very retrograde attitudes. The women are all barefoot and pregnant. They've got very traditional social attitudes, traditional in the really ugly sense.
Right.
So that's definitely a big piece of the whole conservative gestalt is about maintaining those kinds of traditions. I think as a student of conservatism, I think that racism and sexism are inherent in the worldview, and so as they become more and more extreme, those things also become more extreme.
I guess the key word, we're talking with Sarah Robinson. She's a blogger, among other things, and we're talking about the right-wing, movement towards violence. I've had some conversations with people overseas, and what they described is kind of frightening. Italy being a place where you're finding an increase in skinhead activity.
Yes.
Russia is a place that you almost don't even want to go to at this point in time.
Right. And in fact, the Russian and Ukrainian immigrant communities are actually one of the emerging problems we're seeing with right-wing violence, particularly toward gays, because these cultures are extremely anti-gay. And there have been murders in California by Ukrainian immigrants. A lot of this is centered in the Ukrainian and Russian Pentecostal churches, which are growing. Some of it is actually within the more Orthodox. So this is something that is absolutely virulent in the European parts of Russia and in the Ukraine. And as those immigrants move to North America, they are bringing it with them.